Feed the roots. The first thing I noticed about Bellwether was that there were no dogs. Not one. I had been driving west for 3 days, taking the long way across America because I had nothing better to do and nowhere I particularly needed to be. The highway had become a ribbon of asphalt through endless fields, dying towns, rusted barns, and forests that seemed to stretch forever. My car finally gave up just after sunset. Coughed once. Twice. Then the engine died. I coasted onto the shoulder beneath a crooked wooden sign. Bellwether. Population 312. Someone had painted beneath it in red. Leave before dark. I laughed. At the time, I thought it was a joke. My phone showed 1 bar, then none. The nearest town was a little over a mile down an unmarked road. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. That was when I saw the children. They stood along the road. 7 of them. Maybe 8. All staring at me. None of them spoke. They were dressed strangely, not like modern children. One boy wore suspenders. A girl had a faded yellow dress. Another child carried a wooden hoop. They watched me approach with the same expression. Not fear. Not curiosity. Expectation. Finally, the girl in the yellow dress smiled. "You're late." I stopped. "Excuse me?" She looked toward the darkening sky. "You're supposed to be here before dark." Bellwether looked like a town someone had forgotten to finish. There was a grocery store, a gas station, a church with no cross, a diner, and an old wooden building with a sign, "The Last Stop." Almost every adult I saw looked exhausted. The children, however, were everywhere, running through alleys, sitting on rooftops, playing in empty lots, watching. Always watching. I pushed open the door of the diner. Every conversation stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. An old woman behind the counter slowly lowered her coffee cup. "You ain't from here." "No." "You passing through?" My car broke down. The old woman looked toward the windows, then at the clock. 7:43 p.m. Her face changed. "Where's your car?" "About a mile back." "You shouldn't have walked." "I didn't realize there was a problem." "There is." She leaned closer. "You need to get inside before the sun goes down." Outside, the children had gathered across the street. They were staring through the diner windows, waiting. I smiled nervously. "Why?" The old woman didn't answer. Instead, she shouted toward the kitchen. "Frank!" A heavy-set man emerged. He looked at me, then at the children, then back at me. "God help you." "What?" Frank pointed toward the clock. "Dark's coming." At 8:02, every child in Bellwether disappeared. 1 second the streets were full of them. The next, nothing. The silence was enormous. The adults locked their doors, pulled curtains, turned off lights, and waited. I spent the night in a tiny motel beside the diner. The owner wouldn't let me leave. He gave me a key, then grabbed my wrist. "Don't answer the door." "Why?" "If you hear children." He swallowed. "Don't answer." At midnight, something scratched the door. 3 slow strokes. Then a child's voice whispered, "Please." I froze. Another voice joined it. "Please let us in." Then another. "Please." Soon there were dozens. Children crying. Children laughing. Children whispering my name. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, they were gone. The mechanic arrived around 9. His name was Earl. He took one look at my car and shook his head. "Fuel pump." "Can you fix it?" "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow." He shrugged. "Parts have to come from the city." I sighed. "Fine." Earl stared at me. "You need to leave today." I can't. You need to. Why? He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, You ever heard of Feed the Roots? No. Earl's face went pale. Good. He walked away. That afternoon, I learned the town had rules. Children could play anywhere. Adults couldn't. Children could knock on your door. You couldn't knock on theirs. No one went into the woods after sunset. No one walked past the old cemetery. And above all, never participate in Feed the Roots. I found the words carved into a table at the diner. Beneath them was another sentence. The seed always volunteers. I asked the waitress about it. She dropped my coffee. Where did you see that? The table. She looked toward the kitchen, then whispered, You didn't. That evening I went to the last stop. It was the only place in Bellwether where the old people gathered. There were 12 of them, all drinking quietly. None spoke to one another. I sat beside Earl. What's happening in this town? He stared at his beer. How long you got? Tonight. He laughed bitterly. You won't make it through tonight. Then he told me the truth. Bellwether had been isolated for generations. The town wasn't on most maps. People who came through were encouraged to leave. But sometimes someone broke down. Sometimes someone got lost. Sometimes someone was unlucky. And when that happened, the children played their game. Feed the Roots, Earl said. What is it? He looked at me. They choose a seed. What's the seed? You. I laughed. Earl didn't. The children choose somebody from outside town. They invite them to play. If the person agrees, what happens? Earl stared at the floor. The roots get fed. What roots? He looked toward the window. Beyond the town stood a massive forest. Black trees. No leaves. No birds. No wind. The thing beneath Bellwether. My stomach tightened. Thing? Earl whispered. Every town has something it was built on. At 7:58 p.m., someone knocked on my motel door. 3 times. I didn't move. A child's voice whispered, We know you're awake. Another giggled. Then another. Come outside. I stayed silent. Then something slid underneath the door. A small wooden box. I stared at it. Written across the lid were 4 words. Feed the Roots. The knocking stopped. I opened the box. Inside was a tiny black seed. It looked wet. Almost alive. I threw it into the trash. The trash can began to shake. I backed away. Something inside whispered, Seed. Then the lights went out. When they came back on, every child in Bellwether was standing outside my window. Hundreds of them. Children who couldn't possibly have fit inside the town. Toddlers. Teenagers. Infants. Some looked decades old. Some looked impossibly young. They stood perfectly still. Then the girl in the yellow dress stepped forward. She held out her hand. Come play. I locked the door. She smiled. You already did. Behind me came a sound. Tap. I turned. The black seed sat on my bedside table. It had grown. A thin white root had pushed through the wooden shell. Then another. Then another. They crawled across the table, down the side, across the floor, toward me. I stumbled backward. The roots moved faster. They wrapped around my ankle. I screamed. The children outside began laughing. The motel door burst open. Earl stood there holding an axe. Run! We ran through the back door, into the woods. We reached an old church hidden among the trees. There were dozens of elderly people inside. Every one of them had barricaded the doors. Earl slammed the door behind us. They can't come in here. Why? He pointed toward the altar. There was a massive tree root growing through the floor. Black, wet, pulsing, like a vein. Because this is where it sleeps. I stared at him. What is it? Earl shook his head. We don't know. The old woman from the diner stepped forward. We've tried leaving. She lifted her sleeve. Her arm was covered in scars. It always brings us back. Another old man spoke. We've tried burning the forest. We've tried dynamite. We've tried killing the children. Earl looked at him. And the old man looked toward the floor. The children aren't the problem. Something thumped beneath us. Everyone became silent. Another thump. Then another. The floorboards trembled. The root beneath the altar began moving. The old woman grabbed my face. Listen carefully. Her eyes filled with tears. Every generation, it needs a seed. What happens to the seed? She whispered. It grows. The doors exploded inward. Children flooded the church. Hundreds. Thousands. They crawled over one another, laughing, screaming, smiling. The old people backed away. The girl in the yellow dress walked through the crowd. She held out her hand. Come on. I shook my head. She frowned. You don't want to play? No. Her smile disappeared. Then we'll make you. The roots erupted through the floor. They wrapped around the elderly, pulled them screaming into the earth. Earl grabbed me. Run. We fled through a side door, but there was nowhere left to run. The entire forest was moving. Trees bent toward us. Roots ripped through the soil. The ground opened. Something enormous shifted beneath Bellwether. And then I heard it. A heartbeat. Slow. Deep. Ancient. Thump. The children began chanting. Feed the roots. Thump. Feed the roots. Thump. Feed the roots. The girl looked at me. You are the seed. She pointed toward the center of town. Now grow. I woke up beneath the ground. I couldn't move. Roots covered my arms, my legs, my chest. They had pushed into my skin, not cutting, growing. I could feel them inside me. I could feel something drinking through them. Above me, children were singing. Then the girl whispered, Don't worry. Her voice sounded very far away. You'll make lots of children. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. Because something was growing inside my throat. Something with roots. Something with teeth. And somewhere above me, the children were laughing. Years later, people driving through that part of America would sometimes see a little town sign. Bellwether. Population 312. But nobody ever stopped. Nobody ever broke down. Nobody ever stayed after dark. Because the children stood beside the road, waiting. And every once in a while, when a traveler was unlucky enough to stop, one of them would walk up to the driver's window. A little girl in a faded yellow dress. She would smile and ask the same question. Do you want to play? Because Bellwether always needed another seed. And beneath the town, the roots were always hungry.